right, in the news, House Republicans, they apparently are led by House Oversight Committee Chairman Darrell Issa, a Republican from California. Well, they've introduced a bill that will require the president to reduce the federal civilian workforce by 10%, and it all has to happen by 2015. That bill is trying to make certain that only one worker is hired for every 3 workers. For every 3 federal workers who leave government service. And 3 people leave, the feds can only hire 1. So if you haven't lost your job yet, sit tight, darling. It's coming, okay? All right. Issa introduced the bill. It's H.R. 2114. He introduced it along with Representative Dennis Ross. He's from Florida, a Republican. He's the head of the Oversight Subcommittee on the Federal Workforce. Yikes. And Representative Jason Chaffetz. He's from Utah, a Republican. He's the head of its Subcommittee on National Security. That's right. The bill applies to civilian workers in the Defense Department, but not to soldiers. Issa is not stopping there. I want you to know. He's not finished with you yet. All righty. Apparently, he's also planning to introduce a bill to extend and expand the 2-year civilian worker pay freeze. It was introduced by President Obama. You remember that happened in December. It applies to cost of living increases, but not to those step increases within pay grades. Also, apparently there is a provision in the bill that is being called a loophole that allows the government to shift work to contractors. So in other words, they can only hire 1 federal worker for every 3 that they let go. Now, of course, since the federal government still has to get the work done, how are they going to get it done? Bingo. You guessed it. They're going to hire private contractors to do the work that you could be doing as a federal employee with good health insurance and other benefits. Who's that work going to go to? Bingo! If the Republicans follow their pattern, and I'm sure they will, it'll go to their buds, their cronies, like the people at Halliburton who get no-bid contracts for a whole bunch of money and screw everything up. It'll go to their friends who will then have to hire you at probably minimum wage if you're lucky, and certainly no health benefits. I mean, come on, folks. Come on. You see this game. You've seen this game before. All right. Also, House conservatives say they will support the debt limit increase that if Congress passes and sends to the states for ratification a balanced budget amendment that strictly limits spending and requires a supermajority vote to raise taxes. Hey, no more taxes on the rich. That's what they're really saying. The Treasury Department says it can keep the United States, as we know, you've been hearing about that, from defaulting on its debt. It can do it until August 2nd. And Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner last week said it would be, quote, lights out for the economy if Congress fails to raise the debt ceiling. So they're taking every opportunity to take the money, put it in the hands of the wealthy, and keep it out of the hands of everybody else. Let's turn to business news. 2 mortgage servicing companies that wrongfully foreclosed on the homes of at least 178 U.S. military service members, no shame in their game, have agreed to pay at least $22 million in compensation to the troops. Now, we're talking about Countrywide Home Loans. That's now a subsidiary of the great Bank of America. And we're talking about Saxon Mortgage Services, which is a subsidiary of the great Morgan Stanley. Apparently, the companies knowingly and repeatedly violated the Service Members Civil Relief Act. That is a U.S. law. It is designed to protect troops financially and legally. The companies apparently ignoring a provision that says they must obtain court orders before foreclosing on active duty servicemen. I'm sorry for laughing, but can you imagine the gall of these people? You're over there in Iraq or Afghanistan fighting for your country, and they're over here at home fighting to take your house, and they did it. Oh, it's terrible. Saxon Mortgage Services, the Morgan Stanley subsidiary, it apparently illegally kicked 18 troops out of their homes, including some that were seriously wounded in combat and others suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. There is no shame in their game. And speaking of the great Morgan Stanley, that company's executives have given a whole lot of money to presidential hopeful Tim Pawlenty. You better pay attention to this. In fact, executives with Morgan Stanley donated $79,500 to Pawlenty's Freedom First PAC. That's more than any other company's executives except for Federated Insurance, which it would be the insurance industry. And that's according to the Center for Responsive Politics. Now, for its part, Morgan Stanley has been ensnared in federal probes. We know that. All those Wall Street abuses they're being probed for, plus there are state probes going on as well. We know what Morgan Stanley is about. Those probes particularly are in the mortgage industry. Morgan Stanley executive Bill Strong, he is co-chair of Pawlenty's GOP presidential campaign. You should also know that in 2008, Pawlenty, this is from Minnesota, Pawlenty vetoed a bill that was widely opposed by Wall Street interests, which would have imposed a one-year ban on certain foreclosures in Minnesota. He vetoed that bill. In 2009, Morgan Stanley and Company were paid over $700,000 in commissions for managing stocks for the Minnesota State Board of Investment. That board oversees the state's government pension fund. That is a marriage that needs to be broken up immediately. Now let's talk a little bit about the rich, because we do talk a lot about the rich on this program, and one of the things that we've said is that all rich people are not sociopaths and psychopaths. Some of them are decent, law-abiding, patriotic American citizens. And here's a story about them. What do they think about not having to pay taxes and putting the burden of the country on the lesser-to-do folks? Well, you may be surprised. Check this out. A group of 200 self-described patriotic millionaires, they've signed a letter asking congressional Republicans to consider closing budget gaps with increased revenue, in particular putting higher taxes on millionaires. So when people tell you that the millionaires don't want to be taxed, it is not true. Take a look. You should look at the Agenda Project. Please support the Agenda Project. That is a New York think tank. Also take a look at Wealth for the Common Good. That is a network of business leaders and wealthy people that promotes fair and adequate taxation to support the economy. There are a lot of good people in this country, a whole lot of good people in this country. All right, let's focus on them and not these nuts that are running things. Also, an ex-Madoff man is now waiting to hear how much time he's going to spend in prison, and we hope it's a lot of time. His name is Eric Lipkin. He pleaded guilty in the Madoff Ponzi scheme. Apparently, he was the man who helped create the detailed and, of course, completely phony trading and business records that helped Bernie Madoff stay in business for so long. That's what the prosecution has said about him. Lipkin has been released on $2.5 million bond and is scheduled to be sentenced in December. Now, you should know that he is, of course, cooperating with federal investigators and has forfeited $1.4 million. Do they actually think that we think that $1.4 million forfeited by somebody like him, who God knows how much money he's made, do they actually think that that's nothing? Go get his money, as well as other assets. I hope all his assets that will be used to compensate victims of the fraud. See, my question is, where is his house? Because they should have his house. He should be in the shelter. He's on his way to prison. So what's the difference, okay? Take his house and pay those people back. In health news, please watch your gay teen closely. Please watch them closely. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, gay and bisexual high school students are more likely than their heterosexual classmates to smoke, to drink alcohol, and to do other risky things. In a recent survey, gay, lesbian, and bisexual students reported worse behavior in half to 90% of risk categories. For example, 4 to 10% of heterosexual students said they attempted suicide in the previous year, but for gay and lesbian students, it was 15 to 34%. For bisexual students, it was 21 to 32%. Please pay attention to your gay, lesbian, and bisexual teens. Watch them and talk to them. Talk to them, okay? All right, Sarah Palin. We always have a little comic relief. Sarah Palin, of course, doesn't get it. Okay, she doesn't understand that accuracy, it really is important, Sarah. You know that she told a local news station in Boston that Paul Revere, quote, warned the British that they weren't going to be taking away our arms. You can see why she had to go to so many colleges to get her degree. I mean, woo, none of them apparently worked. Anyway, reportedly, as the news media rushed to point out the truth, okay, the true facts of Paul Revere's ride, which we all studied long ago, Palin supporters apparently attempted to update the Wikipedia entry on Revere in order to make it look like she was actually accurate. Can you believe that? That is really, really, really low down. Okay, now, this is what the Wikipedia entry said, and then I'm going to tell you what Sarah Palin's people added. This is what it said this, and it says this. Revere did not shout the phrase later attributed to him. The British are coming. We all know that, okay? Largely because the mission depended on secrecy and the countryside was filled with British Army patrols. Here's what Sarah Palin's people reportedly added. Semicolon, also, comma, most colonial residents at the time considered themselves British as they were all legally British subjects. Honey, let me tell you something. They didn't come over here to be British subjects. Trust me on that one, okay? She is really, really, it's scary that she would stretch the truth, and she'll do anything to be right. That woman never admits that she's wrong, and that is scary because that means you can't learn. All right, let's go to some international news. Germany saying no to nuclear power. The chancellor there, of course, announced on all 17 of the country's nuclear power plants will be shut down by 2022. Much of the decision, of course, having to do with the disaster in Japan. Recent figures show Germany got 23% of its power from nuclear reactors. She is such a strong and an innovative woman there in Germany. All right, finally today, 15-year-old. She's 15 years old. She's in Tahoyah, Washington. She shot her dad because he took away her cell phone. Oh, yes, she did. She's going to face charges of first-degree assault after shooting her father in the torso with his hunting bow. As the severely injured man lay on the ground, bloody and in agony, he begged his daughter to let him use his cell phone to call for emergency help, but she said no. Nope, 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 nope. So he had to crawl out of a window to a neighbor's house where he called 911. He was airlifted. That's how hurt he was. He was airlifted to the nearest hospital where he remains in serious condition. Yikes, I'm scared of her. Let's hope she's not in the school system there. Anyway, those are your stories. Thanks so much for joining me. I am Carol Angela Davis. I'm joining you via Skype. Today is June 7th, 2011. Have a good day.